Welcome back to Between the Lines. Our guest today is Clifford Goldstein, the author of Life Without Limits. He is also the host of his own program right here on the Hope Channel, Cliff. And I want to ask Cliff, let me not say that, because I think that there's something you want to take off with, because we kind of got into something off air. So
he
let me
has
be
written
fair.
so many books, and one of them is his life story, which I read years ago. And I've read many books, but one story that has always stood out, and of all the books I've read, is something that happened to him about how God really was trying to wake him up and just alert him to God's presence.
You know, I had reached a point in as I said, I was a seeker for truth. And then I reached a point at one point where I said, okay, God, if you exist, you got to reveal yourself to me. If you exist, just to say to believe, well, I could believe in the Bastet, the cat goddess of Egypt. So at one point I said, okay, God, if you exist, reveal yourself to me. And then just very quickly, I met a guy who had my same name, Clifford Goldstein, came from the same city I grew up in, Miami Beach. He was in the same kibbutz in Israel I had lived in the same room that I had lived in when I was there, in the same bed that I had lived in when I was there. And when I left the kibbutz, I left a number of my books on the bookshelf. And I come back and I see the books on the shelf, and I ask him if he likes my books. They were his books, same books on the shelf. Then I asked him if he was a writer. He said he was a writer. I was a writer. And I had a blonde Danish girlfriend named Tina when I lived on the kibbutz, and he had a blonde Danish girlfriend named Tina when he was on the kibbutz. So the point on all that, now there's more to the story, but there was one moment when I realized that wasn't a coincidence. And suddenly this very secular, narrow, because a secular worldview is really a very narrow view of the world. It limits everything to, atoms in the void. And I suddenly realized at that point that there was more to reality. There was more to the world than this narrow secular view that I had been raised in. That didn't bring me to the Lord, but it was a step along the way.
Right. One of many fascinating ways that you just opened up to the idea of the supernatural.
Oh, I mean, at that point, what else? I mean, I went through that thing in my mind a million times, and the only rational explanation for that, only rational explanation was that something supernatural, that there was a God involved who worked that all out.
And how did you distinguish? Because the supernatural is at play in so many levels of society today, but it's not God. It's supernatural of an evil kind.
Well, that's a whole other.
I mean, so how did you know that this was not? This was actually a divine encounter.
Yeah, at that point, I didn't know. just the fact that even if there was a satanic power, would have totally shattered my secular worldview. Even if there was that would have totally. In fact, what happened was, you talk about that. Not long after that, I started getting to the occult, and I was having these supernatural occult experiences. At the time, I didn't know what was going on. In fact, that even started. I thought, well, maybe the occult is where the truth is that I'm looking for, and I started getting into the occult. Fortunately, the Lord stopped that very early on. So, but that also helped me realize there is a supernatural realm out there.
So when you sat down to write this book, because obviously there's a process you go through as a writer, what were the initial thoughts? I mean, what were you trying to do?
The main point is, as you mentioned earlier, that people sometimes think, well, you just believe. And sure, faith is an important element. The Bible says without faith it is impossible to believe, to please God, and he that comes to God must believe that he is. But I was trying to show people that you really do have logical, rational reasons to believe in God, to believe in the Bible, to believe in Christianity. It's not just this blind faith. But in anything secular, I don't know how a can opener works. Okay, I don't know I don't know how my car works. There's a certain amount of faith. I mean, one of my TV shows I did a while back, I did a show on mathematics. You don't realize how much faith is involved in mathematics. Everybody thought mathematics is absolute solid. No, there's an element of faith. So everything, there's an element of faith. So how much more if you're going to deal with the Creator God, you're going to deal with all that. You can use logic and reason and ration to a point. Then you step out on faith. But it's not just that in the religious realm. It's that in pretty much every realm that there is.
So when you went seeking truth, did you study a number of world religions?
No. I didn't. I was seeking truth, but it wasn't an intellectual pursuit. It really wasn't. I just sort of wanted to know. I didn't have the intellectual discipline back then to do that. Plus, I'm not convinced it would work. I'm not convinced. If you think about this for a minute, as Christians, what's the most important truth that we know? Most important truth that we know is that Jesus Christ died for our sins.
That's right.
Now, you're never going to figure that out. All the natural philosophy in the world might take you to believe that there's a God, an unmoved mover, or whatever. Science isn't going to take you, reason again could bring you to a creator God. I mean, all these things could bring you to belief in God. And I think logically and rationally, belief in a creator is more logical and rational than not believing in it. Okay?
Sure.
But all those things are never going to take you to the most important thing you have to know. The most important thing we have to know, that Jesus died for our sins, is a truth that has to be told us. Okay? And then when that thought hit me, that really, it was very humbling. And it showed me the limits of science and reason. They have their role, but the most important thing you know has to be told you.
But is that because for us, there's a part that we have to recognize that we are sinners and therefore that's why we need Christ? I mean, is it, or is it just the profundity of the fact that Christ died for us? Who would die for us? I mean, who would step in our place and say, here, I'm going to take this hit for you? Which one?
Well, I think what it is it's just that we can't, that's a truth that had to be revealed to us. You know, we couldn't have figured that out on our own. And so logic and reason can bring you to only so far. I'm convinced that there's much more. Logic and reason is on the side of those who believe in a creator God. You know, people say they believe in the Big Bang. Well, even there's an awful lot of math, an awful lot of physics in the Big Bang. Even if you believe in the Big Bang, you know, you still, where did the science come from for the Big Bang? So ultimately, in the end, no matter how far back you go, you ultimately got to go somewhere where you can't go back any further. Something that doesn't need explanation, something that was always there. And if you think about it logically, what else would that be but God? So that's as far as maybe logic and reason could take you. That doesn't necessarily mean the God of the Bible, you know, the Christian God. And then ultimately, that is revealed truth. And as I tried to show in Life Without Limits, we have very good reasons for believing in that God. Yeah, for believing the truth that is revealed in the Bible and what Jesus has done.
And we're going to spend a little bit more time talking about this book, Life Without Limits. You know, what you have on the cover here, it's powerful truths for your journey to hope and meaning. When you know there's got to be more. So that's really been a part of your journey, knowing that there has to be more. And how do you get that? And I think that the graphic illustration here for this concept, this road, is really appropriate because that's really what this is all about. So we're going to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk about this road that so many people out there who are viewing this are on, and maybe some steps that they can take. Of course, acquiring the book is going to be helpful, but as they acquire it, they still have to kind of work through that. So stay with us. Our guest today is Clifford Goldstein here on Between the Lines. For more information about any of the books presented today on Between the Lines, visit your local Adventist Book Center or go online at www.adventistbookcenter.com. If you're interested in receiving a copy of today's book and live in the United States and Canada, call 1-800-765-6955. Again, that's 1-800-765-6955.